All right, tis the season for Metaverse explorations, and we're going to stay in the Metaverse, and we're going to talk about JPMorgan, which is the biggest bank in the US. They've set up a little outpost in the Metaverse, in this instance, the Decentraland Metaverse. They built a little place to introduce clients and other Wall Street folks to what this whole Metaverse thing can be and is at this moment in time. So interesting thing, we saw this with PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. They did a similar thing a few weeks ago where they built a little Metaverse consultancy in, I think it was the Sandbox Metaverse. But we see these trusted financial brands establishing a foothold in these new virtual spaces, looking to educate folks on what is going on. So this one was another interesting signal of a traditional financial firm doing something new and novel in Web3, and it was certainly pretty interesting to folks and generated a lot of conversation yesterday. So I'm going to throw this straight down to Will for his initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think you did a great job of recapping things. And so I'm just going to jump right to the bottom of this article. See that JPMorgan has somehow found a way to model out what the price is and like the costs and spending in the metaverse in the next few years. So they give an $18.41 billion value by 2027. That's going to be the amount of in-game ad spending in the metaverse. It's across like multiple different metaverses. And that modeling, as far as I can tell from the article, is based on the price jump of parcels of land, of virtual land within different metaverses this past year. So in the latter half of 2021, it went from about $6,000 to $12,000, 100% growth there, which is pretty substantial. To me, that almost just seems like completely like that's lunacy just to model that out and say there's going to be an $18 billion of in-game ad spending in 2027 based on something that is completely new. I don't know if I'm just alone there. Naomi, I want to get your take on this.
Well, I think the average of prices of parcels of land is also a little bit of a strange metric to be using right now because these metaverses all construct their worlds in different ways, right? Some of them are storing things centrally on a database. Some of them cost a huge amount. Everything that you build in those worlds, some of them are centrally stored, some of them are not. And so the costs can vary dramatically depending on whether every time you build something, it's going on chain or not. So it's not just the parcel of the land that needs to be factored in. It's the cost, like gas fees, whatever chain it's on, like how expensive is it to participate in this world? These are all giant factors that I think really complicates the world. And also, we're at such new stages. It's early stages of metaverse building. And so there are all we haven't got permissions figured out in there. We haven't got property rights figured out. Like we're building entirely new digital societies. There's so much to figure out. And so they're using scant details to make predictions about costs and all of this, and they're really not going on much at the moment. But it's interesting that they're like, "Nah, it's enough for us to go on. Let's forge ahead." And interesting that JPMorgan. Okay, we got banks in the metaverse too. Well,
a bank
that's
lounge.
Unpleasant. I thought it was going to be a fun place, guys. But maybe they could make banks a bit more unlike. But yeah, isn't the blockchain world to get away from these things? Anyway, I'm going to throw it to Jen.
It's funny you said, isn't the blockchain world to get away from these things? Because the metaverse is more and more starting to mirror our physical verse, and it just brings up so many questions to me. And one of them is when it comes to land. So when they talk about the price of land doubling last year, I think about physical land, right? That has value because there's scarcity. In the metaverse, we could potentially just have infinite land that pops up. And I know that there are strategic ways to make land not infinite in the metaverse, but it could be infinite and we don't know yet. And to your point, I would love to see the assumptions on that model. We predict that that these sales are going to be this much. And here are all of our assumptions that we've made. And
$18 billion industry based on 1 year.
just before I pass it off to Zach. Go for it, Zach.
No, I think 18 billion is like maybe an understatement because I was at an event over the weekend in Wyoming, and I think that there is this great angst among brands right now, big old brands, that they are unable to connect with new generations of consumers, and they see the metaverse as their best new opportunity to do so. So I would very much expect in the coming years for many big brands to spend many big dollars in these metaverse activations to do just that, right? To place bets on reaching a new generation of consumers who is increasingly wary of connecting with them on all the existing Web2 platforms that exist to date. So 18 billion in terms of companies spending money to reach folks seems reasonable to me, but I'll toss it to Naomi.
Yeah, I think on the scarcity point, it's interesting to kind of recalibrate the way we think of that, because it's not quite physical land that is scarce in this case, but it is a physical space. And we're looking at server space here. Where is your stuff going to be stored? And so obviously it costs money to store things in the digital realm. And so I think a lot of these costs kind of come from that sort of scarcity, although you can technically like infinitely increase the amount of server space in the world, there is a cost to that. And so there is like kind of this supply demand trade-off that happens. It's not like, finite amount of space, but even with like physical land, you can build on top of things. You get air rights. You can build out, like it's not as scarce as perhaps we first think. But throw it to you, Will, for final thoughts and your final bearish outlook.
Just gotta say, I love these bankers coming in with these hot figures. I don't know where they pull them from, but there seems to just be no accountability. You can just publish whatever if you work at a bank because you got the little stamp right there. JPMorgan said this, so it's okay.